Attendees. And the only reason it's on my resume is because for some reason it doesn't show up on LinkedIn. I don't know why, Adam.
Yeah, that was a miss on my part. You create the social media awards for Edmonton and don't create a LinkedIn presence. I think it's because at the time LinkedIn was lame. So anyway, thank you for joining us, Andrew. It's great to have you. Cheryl, tell us what you do, where you work, and something interesting we wouldn't find on your resume.
Hi, everybody. I'm Cheryl Meger. I'm the Director of Client Services at the ZGM Edmonton office. So strategy, planning, project management, client relations is the gist. I've been doing this work for about 15 years now. I don't know, Adam, if you find this that interesting, but I'm terrible at updating LinkedIn, so there's not much on there anyways. But when I first started in agency life at Calder Bateman, my very first client was actually the government of Alberta and working on traffic safety. So amazing how, that first entry into the world kind of sets the path for your career over the next 15 years and the kind of work you get to be a part of.
Yeah, that's awesome, Cheryl. It is interesting. And I just have to say, although I know you were acquired by ZGM, RIP Calder Bateman.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go next to Sean Williams. Introduce yourself, my friend.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me here. I'm Sean Williams. I'm currently the creative director at AMA, Alberta Motor Association. I've been in the industry for a little while, spent some time agency side, and I've gone in-house for the last little while. Something interesting about me is in 2009, when I was coming out of school, back when social media contests and Twitter was in its infancy days, I won a free car. They were giving away a Nissan Cube via Twitter social media contest, 50 across the country. And as an advertising student or a recent grad, I created a campaign around myself, creating videos and all this wacky content back then. And I won a free car.
I actually remember that campaign, Sean, because I watched it with some interest.
Yeah. And back then when I first came to Edmonton, I was at Calder Bateman, and someone who worked there caught wind of that and sent an all staff email with my videos to everyone. So that was fantastic.
Sean Williams is a Cuban. You're absolutely right about that. Thank you so much for introducing yourself, Sean. And last but not least, let's go next to Neil Simonton.
Hello, everyone. Neil Simonton here. I see a lot of names joining the meeting that I recognize, so really happy to be here. I'm Director of Brand and Marketing at the Government of Alberta. I am part of CPE, so that's Communications and Public Engagement. We're sort of the central service provider for communication services in government. So I'm here to talk client side, but prior to joining government 9 years ago, I think, I worked on the agency side as a writer. So seen it from both sides. Something interesting about me that wouldn't be on my resume. Well, one thing wouldn't be on there because you'd have to go way, way back. And that is my first job out of high school. I worked at a steel factory. So I was there for a couple of years as a laborer, but took a turn eventually into
That's incredible, Neil. I didn't have you pegged for a steel worker, but I can see it. It's funny you would say we always use the phrases client side, agency side, and part of this discussion about sort of the future of agency client relationships, we're also going to talk about the present of agency client relationships for context setting. But it's interesting to me that we use that language and talk about sides. So I want to start the discussion with that in mind and thinking about what to you panelists is the hallmark of an excellent agency client relationship. And maybe if you can provide some examples for us. And Neil, maybe we'll stick with you. You've got the steely gaze of a steel worker, and I know you've been thinking about this question. So, what's the hallmark of an excellent agency-client relationship?
Well, I would say on a very broad and general level, and this I think would apply to any client, any agency. It's really about a real strategic partnership, a collaborative relationship, not one that's like purely transactional. Really sort of characterized by trust between the two parties. And I know that's sort of really airy-fairy kind of words, but I believe it to be true. And I think, for us specifically at the government, we're kind of a unique beast. Obviously every client is unique in its own way. But I think we find success with agencies when they can demonstrate that they really understand the unique challenges that we face as a public sector client, and a big unruly one, with really complex approval processes and lots of stakeholders, changing direction depending on the news of the day, and understanding our level of risk tolerance as it may pertain to creative. So that's what I would say for us specifically. And I think I just would add that some of this sort of trust and experience just comes with time and experience, really. So we have agency relationships on the creative and on the media sides that go back 15, 20 years. And so over time you just get to know each other well. And I think that's how you develop trust. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, love that. That's great. Sean, let's stay on the quote unquote client side and get your perspective on what makes an excellent agency client relationship.
My perspective is a bit unique because I lead the in-house creative agency, and we service around 9 to 10 internal business units, some for internal requests and external business units, outward-facing materials. That being said, as much as we're an in-house creative agency, we have and sometimes do partner with external agencies. So we kind of have an internal agency partnering with external, but then we're also an internal agency that is supporting our stakeholders and the rest of our marketing department and other business units that we have. I very much agree with everything that Neil was saying. I think that focusing on trust and our openness and collaboration on both sides is key to success. From the client side, I think there needs to be a lot of flexibility and a lot of understanding on the business needs, which goes on both sides. You want to make sure that we have sound strategic direction when it comes to what requests are being created, but we also need to have a lot of collaboration and back and forth. For us in-house, we try to make sure that the lines of communications are very much open and collaborative as we work very closely, just to be able to walk down the hall to a stakeholder and collaborate. And we're very much aware that, good ideas can come from anywhere. And on the creative side, you need to be receptive to that, but also there needs to be a lot of openness and collaboration to be able to push back from the creative side as well, and to have those healthy discussions to get the best results.
That's awesome. Yeah, you're in an interesting situation where you do have that in-house team, and we'll maybe talk about some of that later. I know that members of our viewing audience would also be interested to sort of understand the tension and glory of both working together. Cheryl, excellent agency client relationships. You haven't been part of any of those, have you?
I've been very fortunate to have a good number of them. First on the trust piece, like Neil said, I totally agree with that. And I think while trust is earned and built and solidified over time, I do find that some of the best relationships are when you come in starting at a place of trust rather than being skeptical or maybe guarded. You as an agency wanted to work with a client or take on a project for a certain reason. You as a client wanted to, picked this agency for a certain reason of their expertise or their portfolio or just great vibes with the people in the room. So I think if you can come into the relationship feeling trust and not necessarily scrapping to earn it right from day one, I think that helps a lot. And then the other thing I think I would say about the excellent relationships is having depth to the relationship. So like as a client, I don't want you to only know me or somebody else on the account team. Like, yes, we're your door into the agency, but I want you to know who your media planner or buyer is. I want you to know who your art director is or who's, doing the dev work on your site and have connections. Just as I would love to have the ability to know, say, your sales team and what they're up against, or, build some connection into your C-suite that just helps have depth beyond it so that it minimizes the game of telephone that inevitably gets played as strategy or feedback or whatever it is going back and forth, but I think then it's just a more holistic understanding for everybody about what's going on, what's leading to this project, and what we're all trying to do. So those would be my two things.
That's great. I love that. I love the game of telephone can definitely happen. So that's sort of like flat elimination of hierarchy. You still need one throat to choke, and that's Cheryl's throat if you're the client. But having access to those people is amazing. Andrew, tell us your perspective on the hallmark of an excellent agency-client relationship.
Yeah, for sure. I think obviously trust, flexibility, those are all very important. I would also say, respect and empathy. It's important to know what the client wants, but also dig a little bit deeper, understand why they want it, what's important to them, and make sure your values are aligned. I think a hallmark of a great client relationship is just evolving and listening with your client, making sure that we're taking the time to adapt to their world. Make sure that we're taking the time to understand our clients' needs. And, examples of success would be just the multi-year AOR assignments that affords us. Like Neil said, taking the time to grow with your client is important. It takes a lot of time to win new business, and so really being able to springboard off that and maintain those relationships is really important. So that's a good hallmark of success.
It's interesting because I think the important thing to remember, at least as I'm hearing you all share your answers, is these are we talk a lot about business to business, right? But these are still human to human relationships. There are emotions, there can be joy, frustration, and what something you all said or agreed with was this notion of like transparency and trust. And I think that embedded in those things is honesty. So when things aren't going so great, you have to have those frank discussions. Let's talk about when things aren't going so great. I'm here for the tea, and so is everyone else. So what are some of the frustrations that you have experienced, not naming names, of course, but where things maybe start to go just a little bit sideways? What in your experience causes those kinds of frustrations? And Andrew, maybe let's stick with you on this one.
Sure. I think agencies often have a hard time defining and communicating value for their in-house team. Sometimes, we say, well, if the client's not getting it, they just aren't experienced working with an agency. But that's really our fault, making sure that we're doing our part in communicating our value and just taking the time to really be a great partner with the with the in-house team. I'd also say, short-term outcomes versus long-term brand wins. And that's another area where, if the in-house team is looking for a quick win, we just need to make sure that we're doing our part in communicating where those opportunities are for long-term brand building and, sometimes finding a happy medium or an iterative path to help clients get to where they want to be without, sacrificing some of that long-term strategic value.
I love that. I appreciate you taking responsibility for, instead of being dismissive of, well, they just don't get us, right? You're right. It's a sales job all the time. Neil, agree, disagree, completely different perspective from what Andrew just shared?
Totally agree. I think that's a great perspective and taking ownership of the situation as an agency. By the same token, I would argue that as a government client, most of the frustrations that are experienced as part of campaigns or projects are our own damn fault. It's rarely the agency's fault. It's more our sort of changing of direction or, in not properly defined objectives from the get-go, that kind of thing. So I would say the blame usually falls on our shoulders. One sort of like more tactical thing that sometimes causes, I wouldn't say frustration because it's totally reasonable, but like sometimes as a client, if we initiate a project with a creative agency, for example, we don't necessarily know which resources are going to be assigned to that project. And because people they're busy on other projects, maybe they're away. And that's something that we've battled with over the years is like, not being able to necessarily get the A team, for example, on a certain project. So yeah, that's one thing I put out there.
Interesting. Well, there's no one from the B team here today, my friend. So don't you worry about that. Sean, how about you? Frustrations that you've experienced working with outside agencies, what do those look like? How do they manifest?
Never experienced any frustrations ever. I don't know what you're talking about. No, I find that majority of the frustrations, or some of the frustrations, tend to stem from lack of alignment from the get-go. Could be strategic alignment, or as Neil said, aligning on what that objective is, or that clear strategy from the beginning. If you're not starting from a clear foundation and you don't know what target you're trying to hit, then it just creates so much room to go astray or go the wrong direction, and then you start getting into scope creep, or strategies. You get into different versions and all that stuff. So I find that allowing enough time to be strategically aligned on both sides, from the client side and creative side, will save a lot of headache in the long term. Another big pain point that I find, and I'm sure creative people can attest to this, is feedback. So whether it's in-house or whether it's external, receiving feedback and types of feedback from clients or from creatives, I think it's a two-way street, two-way conversation. So a lot of times I find that people in general have a difficult time communicating feedback, and feedback tends to be subjective, and we try to bring that feedback back to the strategy and the objective that we're trying to hit. So be more strategic on the feedback, as opposed to, I don't like that just because, or blue isn't my favorite color. And then on the flip side of that is, from the creative side, how do you welcome feedback and how do you be receptive to feedback? Where we're creating creative work, which is subjective, and there are multiple solutions out there. We need to, we put our hearts out there with creative work, and we need to kind of welcome it getting beaten up, but take the personal perspective out of it. How do we look at it objectively and say, are there rooms for improvement, but not take the feedback personally? So it's a bit of a two-way street, and it comes back to that aspect of collaboration, openness, and flexibility.
As a creative director I once worked with said, you have to be okay with killing your own babies and allowing others to kill your babies too when it comes to feedback. Maybe not the most PC thing to say, but Cheryl, I'm not about PC. So tell me about your experiences when you've had frustrations. What phrase some of these relationships in your experience?
Yeah, I think, they're similar to what some others have already said, but I think that one of them, which ties to, the idea of like transparency and kind of understanding the full picture, is if you're working with a client who's really guarded and keeping stuff close to their chest, and they kind of don't let you understand the full context of their business or how what you're working on ties into other things, sometimes then we get held accountable to things we actually don't understand. We kind of get this little line of sight, but actually are being held accountable based on a whole bunch of other things happening. So again, that's just where the open door and the openness and transparency with one another really matters. And then the other one, which is tied to the feedback, we'll lovingly call it the swoop and poop of somebody who has had little to no involvement throughout a whole project. When you developed the strategy, when you did the research, when you did the original concepts, all of that sort of thing. Everyone, your immediate client and their team and your whole internal team is so thrilled with what you have at the end. And then, final production, so it's just nixed or totally changed direction. And you just wish you could have had some of that input earlier on instead of the swoop and poop.
I didn't know it was called that. I'm not sure that I'm glad that I know that now, but I appreciate the rhyming of it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Or, that can happen for a number of different reasons, but I've even had experiences where clients, or even, internal teams, will get cold feet, and then they both swoop and poop. To your point, Cheryl, that's great. I really appreciate that. I wonder, we've talked about what's great, what makes a good client relationship. We've talked about some of the challenges that can crop up in agency client relationships. What do you foresee as some of the biggest challenges that we'll experience in these relationships as the industry evolves, as budget shifts, as technologies change? what are some of the things you're anticipating having to deal with in agency client relationships? And maybe we'll go to Neil for this one to start.
Let me just sort of pick up on something Sean was speaking to around sort of internal creative capacity, because we have an internal creative team as well. And it seems like there's more and more of that happening. And I think sort of defining the roles between internal and external creative, that's going to continue to prove to be a challenge on both the client and the agency sides, and, potentially eating away at agency business. And you can see, some of this perhaps supported by the proliferation of, creative AI tools, right? Where, on the client side, you could just whip up some photos with some prompts in an AI platform and come up with a snappy headline and put it on there in Canva, and then run a little social campaign, right? That you maybe previously you would have gone external for that. So I can see if there is indeed, if this is a trend towards more internal creative being produced, that could be a challenge moving forward.
Yeah, that's a big one for sure. Andrew, what's your perspective on this? What do you see as some of the upcoming challenges in some of these agency client relationships?
Yeah, maybe just to build off what Neil said, I think the flip side of that is, we have a pretty robust legal team, digital team, global network of people who are actively looking at AI and the way that we use it. But that also means we have some very strict policies around usage rights, which is important for some clients like government who understand, the risks involved and need a partner who also understands those risks. So that's a big part of where we try and be cautious about how we use technology. Also, an agency can often invest in technology in ways that an in-house team maybe can't. So, for example, we can test things and try things. We can invest in things because we apply it to clients in a number of different categories or at scale. And so that's something that we can bring to the table that maybe your in-house team doesn't have the ability to do on their own. And vice versa, like we're also very flexible. We work with all types of clients, so we can often work with whatever tools or software or platform the agency is using or in-house team is using pretty easily.
That's great. No, that's really interesting. The technology and scale across verticals, across clients is an interesting one, I think, for sure. Cheryl, how about you? What do you see coming down the pike that's giving you pause and you think will be a challenge moving forward?
I think it's something we started to see already, but to me, it's like the continued, the continued demise of like in-person interaction. And just like we all learned how to work remotely, and we do it all the time now. And we've become efficient and effective at it. But I do think in terms of relationship building, you have to admit that some things have been lost when you don't get the just extra social interaction at the beginning or the end, when it's just so easy to, use a Zoom link to go to a shoot rather than, travel to wherever in whatever remote part of the province for a couple of days. And I just think we miss that. And I think that, when we use tech to have all of our meetings and all of our conversations, like inevitably it becomes more transactional than conversational. And so I think it's really important that agencies and clients work to find those opportunities to connect as people. Like we said at the very beginning, yes, they're agency client relationships, but they're people relationships. And how are you best going to actually build those connections? So
I was nodding so vigorously in my head, almost fell off of my neck, because I've been thinking about that a lot. Like I love that technology allows us to operate outside of the market, to partner with, creators and freelancers maybe we wouldn't have before, but like there's something about having that meeting and then being like, do you have 15 minutes to go grab a coffee? Like from a intelligence gathering perspective, I'm thinking really agency side here. And even from a business development perspective, I hate it when companies are like, well, if we're in the same place, there will be creative collisions. And I hate it because it sounds dumb, but it's true. So that's a really interesting perspective, Cheryl. Sean, let's end this question with you. Where are you seeing some of the challenges coming down the horizon through your work at AMA?
I think some of the biggest challenges are with creative work, trying to be very agile, and developing quick content, especially with social media trends, quick online PPC campaigns, or if you had an online asset that's performing really well, but you wanted to test other ones, creating multiple online assets. So being able to react quickly if, there's a campaign or a deal that you need to quickly stand up a bunch of creative, how do you move quickly? And I think the challenge with that is ensuring that you have a strong process and foundation on how you start the work, but also a strong process for approvals. Because if you're trying to move quickly and you don't have that foundation set, work is going to bottleneck, and it's just hard to get something out quickly when you have multiple stakeholders and you don't have the right process in place. To make that work a lot more seamless is a strong relationship, strong strategic relationship process and understanding of expectations, so you can move quickly. So I'm finding with, so much work going digital, you need to be able to react quickly, and not every campaign has 4 weeks to execute. Sometimes you got to turn something around in a day to a week, depending on what it is.
Yeah, I'm sure everyone on this call has experienced those pressures and challenges, Sean. I think that's really great. I want to stick with you for a sec, because we talked a little bit about in-house creatives, in-house agencies. I wonder if we can chat briefly about where the strength lies in pulling in outside resources, be they agencies like where Andrew and Cheryl work, or freelancers to supplement the work of those in-house teams. What do you see? Where do you see the benefits there? And I don't know if you can share some examples of how it's working, but I'd love to hear your perspective, Sean.
From my experience, whether you have an in-house creative agency or, I've worked with external agencies, I've been on the other side as well. There's opportunity for creative work on all sides. With the right talent and the right process in place, you can create amazing work on all sides. The benefit of an external creative agency is it is always beneficial to have fresh eyes and fresh perspective, to bring external creativity, and to have a different strategic lens on your business and your brand is kind of invaluable. That being said, having some long tenured brand knowledge internally can also provide a lot of experience and expertise as to how you're building your creative. Kind of lost my train of thought. What was the second part of your question there?
If there are any examples that you can share, you can be vague if you want, but where you bring in an agency, where do they focus? Where do your in-house people focus? What does that look like? If you can share, I understand if you can't.
I think it depends on the type of project and the type of expertise that you might have, depending on how your team is built, if you have capacity, or if you need a certain type of expertise externally that you might not just have internally. I can speak to my past experience where, at my last place, we did a whole lot of packaging design, and we were at capacity with the amount of work we could take on in-house. We partnered with an external agency that was doing some of our packaging design, and ultimately we got it to 70 or 80%, and we were at a point where they couldn't take it any further. We weren't happy with it. And then with the expertise we had in-house, we ended up bringing that work in, and we collaborated with them to get it to 100%. Not uncommon to some other projects we've worked at here at AMA, where we've partnered with agencies, and sometimes it's nice to have that external perspective. We bring it in, and then we might evolve on a concept or an idea and then take it to final.
Yeah, that's really helpful to understand that. I've certainly been in situations on both sides of the fence, I guess, the line sides. I'm still not comfortable with that. But where you have had, it feels a little collaborative. You're like, we're going to do this first part, and then the finishing goes over here. So I really appreciate that. But yeah,
we're kind of in a unique spot because I remember being agency side and you're working with clients, and the last thing you want is for the client to say, oh, thanks for all those concepts and ideas. Here's my idea, With us having an internal creative agency, we have that capability where, you know, the ideas or the concepts might be coming to us, and then we're going to look at it and we're going to dissect it from the business perspective. We say, you know what, we actually have a build on that, or we have another idea, and we're going to collaborate. And then we're going to go back to our agency, which we have done before, and we then say, okay, well, here's what we're proposing, or here's how we can kind of meet in the middle. And that's where it really comes back to that strong relationship. And even with the agency we're partnering with, you know, being receptive to the ideas that we're proposing, and then we kind of meet in the middle and find a solution together.
Interesting. Cheryl, that to me, tell me if you agree with it or not. It sounds like there are scenarios where a full service agency isn't required, but maybe some of your strategists need to be leaned on by a client. Is that something that you're seeing happening on the agency side?
Yeah, I think like a couple of things with this. For sure, one is like what I would say to clients is if you know you're going to have multiple partners involved and you're going to take some of your dollars or your resources and outsource them to an agency partner, like first ask yourself, what do you think the most valuable thing you could get out of that partner is that you can't get from your in-house team? Like, you know, your dollars are limited, your resources are limited. In some cases, a lot of cases with us, that's probably like the upfront strategy work and consulting and, you know, setting a path forward. In other cases, though, it could be like social community management or blog writing or whatever that is. But like, what is missing from the team that you're supplementing here, and how can who you're outsourcing to add the most value? And then I just think as you start this process, you know, the over communication becomes more important than when you have one partner. And you know, always there's like a bit of awkwardness when you know you might be working with other teams or even other agencies, but people have to kind of drop that at the door and try and like view you all as one combined team that's working to solve a problem or put a project together. And you know, I think that becomes easier though when everyone's really clear about what they're there to do and what their role is in the project, so that you don't trip over each other about like somebody who's going to execute this, or why don't we get to do that part, or whose call the final media placements are, or whatever the thing is.
Yeah, scope is critical, and having that clarity at the top hopefully prevents any tripping over each other throughout the project. Neil, how about you? How is your in-house team working with agency partners, both on the creative side, the media buying and planning side, et cetera?
Well, on the creative side, basically it's a judgment call, whereby if it's a project that either we don't have the resources that can do that kind of work, or we're at capacity, then that's when we're going to go outside. And so basically what it comes down to is bigger, more complex types of campaigns. We go outside and work with external vendors on that. Sometimes what you'll see is a externally developed campaign creative that we, like Sean said, might take it and sort of not evolve it, but maybe do some production on it. So for example, produce some translated digital display ads based on that campaign creative. That wasn't part of the original scope for whatever agency we engaged. And I think for us, it's like Sean said, it's really important for us to get that sort of fresh thinking that comes with working with external partners, because government can be so sort of insular, and it's such a strange, unusual beast that if you're working within it, it's hard to sort of, you know, think outside the box, basically. So yeah, you know, we really value our external creative partners, and we use them all the time. That said, if we have a smaller, more sort of straightforward informational type campaign, maybe it's all digital tactics, then we'll use our internal resources just to save some dollars, basically. One thing I see, and not with me directly, but with sort of arm's length government areas, is like branding work. Sometimes there might be some engagement with an external partner, but maybe it's just like the art director at that agency is coming in to, you know, workshop with whatever internal team is there and develop, you know, do some branding development, that kind of thing. So I, have heard of those types of situations, and I think that those kind of like service packages, for lack of a better word, are going to be important moving forward, whereby it's kind of like embedding, but it's just sort of a piece of your team, a piece of the agency team coming to help out with the internal team.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've seen that in a few spots work really well, actually. But I think it is a brand new paradigm for some agencies anyway. Andrew, what about your perspective? How is your team embedding with, or not necessarily embedding, but working in step with in-house agencies on the client side?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I like that Sean mentioned, an in-house team can do things really quickly. I think there's a good quote that reminded me of that goes, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And to me, that means, bringing an agency allows you to have more perspectives in the room. Obviously, you have your subject matter experts, but that also goes the other way. And like, we just need to recognize that the inputs matter, and the time it takes us to get to know our clients and then really actually involve them. Don't just get their feedback, take the work away. But for example, we do our construction sessions with clients where we have our strategy exercises. We'll bring in the entire client team or our entire team and bring them together. But we do that branding as well, and sometimes it's a matter of getting the creative team from the in-house team together with our team and just having like an actual working session, showing them, our scribbles and our notes and working through the idea together. It's not really like take feedback, fix it, revise, but actually like embed them in the process.
What I like about that is a philosophy that I've heard from different agencies, something we believe where I work at Adverb Communications is there's an opportunity to be the best part of your client's day, Andrew. And I think you're talking about the kind of collaboration, the kind of activity that probably isn't typical for some clients. Like their day-to-day isn't like creation, it's operations, right? So I think there's something really interesting there. I want to flip it a little bit to the audience. We've got a few questions here, and this one's interesting to me because when on the agency side, we care a lot about industry awards. So I want to ask Sean and Neil, how do you folks perceive industry awards in your shops, and like, do they influence who you choose to work with at all? And maybe Sean, we'll start with you on this one.
I've seen both sides of this. I know how important awards are, when it comes down to us partnering with an external agency or us creating the work in-house, what's driving that is really the business result. Our ultimate goal is, what problem are we trying to solve? What business results are we trying to achieve? And then what are those results and how is the campaign achieving that? As opposed to creativity for the sake of creativity to win awards. I think we can achieve both. There's a way to have creativity that is effective and yields results for the business unit. But our ultimate objective is not to chase the awards. That being said, there's always an opportunity to achieve both of those.
Is that a factor in your mind, Sean, when you're choosing to work with an agency partner? Do you, like, if they give you a list of awards in their proposal, you're like, do you spend a lot of time on that page?
Not from my experience. I mean, I have a different perspective because I've been on both sides of it. So I think when we're looking to partner with people, or in my past, if we ever partnered with an agency, whether it's local or international, it's really finding the right partner and the right fit that is going to connect with the business need and what you need for that brand. So, I mean, obviously you want great creative, but great creative without the end result and the impact is, it's important.
I mean, everyone talked about strategy, all four of you, off that first question. So if what I'm interpreting from that is, if the creative isn't driven by strong strategy, then the awards are basically just a beauty pageant at that point. Neil, do you agree with that perspective? Do you have a bit of a different point or take on it?
I agree 1000%, Sean, and I would probably go a little bit further and just say, no, we don't care. frankly. It's really about achieving the results of the project, achieving the objectives, and one of which is never to win awards. That said, we've won a couple with external agency partners, and it's nice. It's nice to get awards. But ultimately, I think of the people I report to, like the executives and the people on the political side, they don't know what these awards mean, and they don't care. So for me, I have the perspective, I'm a sort of somewhat reformed creative, and I like them, and it's somewhat meaningful to me, but ultimately it doesn't really matter, frankly.
In the business sense of the word, but it sounds like both you and Sean understand what they mean to agencies, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'd love to take part in the process and help develop the application or whatever it may be. And I'm happy that our agency partners are, entering these awards. But that's about as far as it goes.
Cheryl and Andrew, how does that make you feel? I'm curious to know what you think about that.
No, I mean, I'm not surprised, and that's how people should feel. Like, that's how we should feel too, is like, okay, like, I'm glad this thing that was a really cool idea won an award, but if it didn't do anything in the end result, then like, whatever, but they are important to agencies. Obviously, they're important for like our own brand building and reputation and recognizing all the effort that the team puts into things throughout the year. But 100% agree, like, if you're doing creative just for creative sake, like, you're wasting your time, really. And like, that's not what I think anyone here is really in the business of. And for us, the awards we're most excited to enter and most proud of winning are the ones that do have the effectiveness and results like built into the judging of it, like the Effies, like that's the one we want. We still love all the other ones and love that celebration of great work, but like, the effectiveness and the Effies are the ones we want the most.
But you still love the ACE Awards, right? Cheryl?
I love the ACE Awards.
Okay.
Of course. Have you seen me at the ACE Awards? Like, of course I love them. No, we'll take them all day. And we, like I said, love celebrating the team and all the work and really this whole community. But again, I would just agree that if it's not for ultimate results, then whatever.
Yeah. Andrew, what do you think about this question? How did the response from the fellows on the client side make you feel?
I mean, we should always be striving to produce award-worthy work. That's the strategy behind it. We've won an Effie just recently here. There's a lot of work that goes into that, and I think that's also proof in just demonstrating value to your clients and showing them that while some awards may be subjective, like, there is that case study to say, here's what we did, and it was graded and passed the grade. Like, you guys were delivering, and here's kind of the final exclamation point on that proof.
I like that. That's a great answer. Berlin folks, thank you for the question. There's another question here from Yulia, and they're asking, which skills or expertise do you believe are in short supply on the client side, often being delegated to agencies? And I'll flip it a little bit for agencies. Where are you reaching into your talent pool of freelancers or partners or vendor partners where there aren't those skills on your team? And Andrew, maybe we'll stick with you to start this one off.
We work with freelancers all the time. We've got some really great freelancers for specific types of creative. If we want a specific style for a campaign, if we're looking for a specific time period where we need some production, or if they have experience producing a certain type of deliverable. So we have a great relationship with a ton of different freelancers.
Neil, where are you seeing the need to bolster skill sets with your agency partners that you don't have internally?
Well, I would even just pick up on what Andrew said, and like, we don't have those relationships, right? So it's really important. We have to work with our agency partners who have those relationships and have these networks, because we don't have access to them ourselves. I think for us, strategy is really important. That's sort of one thing our agency partners bring to the table, that sort of upfront strategic thinking that we really value, because we don't have it in-house. And then like production management. So like, for example, like managing a big TV shoot, or, you know, engaging with your production partner to put on a TV shoot. You know, we can't do that in-house. So it's important that we have external partners to do that for us.
How about you, Sean? What skill sets are you folks getting from agencies to support the work you're doing?
Traditionally, we focused more on some of the big idea campaign thinking or some of the, you know, big commercial projects. We've since moved some of that work in-house as we've grown and bolstered up the team's capabilities. Usually our biggest challenge is capacity with the amount of work that's coming our way internally. We have been actively bolstering our network of freelancers, vendors, you know, working directly with a lot of those within the network. We very much are building our team and working in the same kind of structure as an in-house creative agency, somewhat. So I'd say more on the big idea thinking traditionally.
Awesome. And Cheryl, how's it working at ZGM? Where are you drawing in talent, or what kind of talent are you drawing in that's not necessarily on the team day to day?
Yeah, very much like Andrew. It's, you know, production, execution stuff for the most part of, do we need a certain illustrative style or a certain animator or whatever, or just like supplementing capacity, right? If we just hit an incredibly busy phase and need an extra writer or something like that. And then maybe the one other section would be, you know, if we're doing some research or if we're trying to engage with a really specific community, like Indigenous consultation, for example, and like bringing in a partner that really like will do that in the right way, and kind of guide us through the process on that sort of thing.
That's awesome. There's a great question here from Lizette on, this is maybe, excuse me, for folks on the agency side. So Cheryl, let's stick with you on this one. If a client keeps pushing for unrealistic results, how do you reset expectations without losing their trust?
I mean, one of the things that I have said to my team before is it is our job to say the hard things, that like we can't be scared of them not liking the answer. Like we, especially in the strategy role, are paid to be advisors and give advice. And you're not setting anybody up for success if you take something that is like clearly misaligned of like objective to approach they're going down or budget that's assigned to something, and just saying, okay, like I think you have to assert the concern. At the end of the day, it is what it is, and this is like what they're being pushed to, but I just think you have to lay it on the table, and then do the best you can, right? Like, but I think it's your job to say it and to give the advice, and if your client takes it, they take it. If they don't, they don't. You're still gonna like do what you can to make the work as good as it can be.
Andrew, what's your perspective on this? How are you managing expectations when they seem a little out of step?
Well, I mean, if the client's out of step, it sounds like, you know, there's a need for us to ask some better questions and dig deeper, like what's causing that misalignment. And it may be something like the client is new in the role and they really want to, you know, make their mark out of the gate, and so they're setting really high expectations. Or maybe, like Cheryl said, there's some sort of outside factor that we're not aware of that's driving this goal. So it really is about understanding where this direction or misalignment is coming from, and just asking better questions. And sometimes it may be a case of you know, taking the client out and having some one-on-one time, or bringing some other people into the room and getting some different perspectives. So I think yeah, really just taking the time to understand what's driving that is going to help you resolve it.
For Neil and Sean, when an agency partner tells you that your desire for results is out of step or insane, how do you typically respond to that, or what are the things they do that make you feel okay when you're corrected on that stuff? I guess, Neil.
Well, I guess first of all, I'll say that, you know, in my role, my group's role, we are sort of the interface with the agencies, but we're serving our own internal clients, right? Like we're not the ultimate client, we're serving other clients. And so what we try to do is really unpack what that ultimate client wants, and maybe they're changing direction or asking for something totally unreasonable, but then be as perfectly transparent as possible with our agency partners. So try to like just lay our cards on the table to the degree we can. You know, some things are just purely confidential, but I just try to be super open so they really understand where our client is coming from. And as some people probably on this call can attest, sometimes we just have to do what the client wants to do, and even if it's not smart or it's not reasonable. But you know, I just try to be like a really close partner to our agency and understand that we're in the trenches with them, and you know, take their advice as much as we possibly can.
That's great. I love that. Sean, how about you? How do you get the bad news when an agency's like, I'm not sure that we're going to be able to do the thing you want us to do?
I'll speak to this from an internal perspective, working with our internal stakeholders and business units. And I think building on what Neil just ended with is the key. It's very much a partnership, right? We are in it with our stakeholders. We're in it with our business units who are requesting to us. So we have ambitious goals, right? Whether it's we're increasing membership, we're increasing travel sales, or increasing our travel medical insurance signups, right? We're in it together, and you know, the strategy is being developed around what it is we're trying to achieve, and we're working with them on what type of creative assets and what deliverables we can help get to that, whether it's, you know, one campaign that's going to achieve that, or if it's multiple throughout the year, or if it's a stage approach. So I think it's really much a shared responsibility and a group effort on it.
Excellent. Now we've got 4 minutes left, so this is going to be my final question. I want to bring us kind of back to the start. We talked about what makes excellent agency-client relationships. I want you each to answer the question of, what is it that you most appreciate about your counterparts? So Cheryl and Andrew, what do you most appreciate about your clients? And Sean and Neil, what do you most appreciate when you're working with your agency partners? And Sean, let's go to you on this final question to start.
Am I answering internally with my client side, or am I speaking to external agencies that I've partnered with?
Tell us about what you most appreciate when you've partnered with external agencies as a client.
I think it's that openness and flexibility. In my experience, when I've partnered with other external agencies, and they look at us as a client, but then they're like, oh, wait a second, there's a creative director on the call. You know, that's probably not normal, or in most cases, they're expecting it to be, you know, your typical client lineup, and you're not having a creative director and designers and stuff. What I've appreciated is that openness to different perspective on ideas, whether it's been a packaging design agency that I've partnered with, or whether it's you know, traditional ad agency that's coming up with concepts and ideas. It's being open to that perspective from creative as well, and because I don't think that's easy. I don't think that's easy for agencies and for creative people who are coming in saying, you know, here's our solution to your problem, and then us coming back with, okay, here's how you're hitting the strategy, but also here's another creative solution that we want to collaborate with you. We collaborate with you on. So I think that openness and willingness to collaborate and have that other perspective.
That's great. Andrew, how about you? What do you really appreciate most about working with clients?
I mean, I really appreciate when our clients trust us enough to do something unexpected, to take a different path. Sometimes that requires us to build trust by building in some testing, you know, helping them warm up to the idea, really showing them our work, like you say, collaborating. But ultimately, you know, when we're able to take a client in a direction they didn't expect, or something completely new, and that's how we achieve their business goals, I think that's what I really appreciate, is having that relationship to be able to take the work in a completely different direction than they previously been able to do.
That's cool. It can be a wild ride, and if they're with you on it, it's even more fun. Neil, how about you? What do you appreciate about working with your counterparts on the agency side?
I would echo what Andrew just said. I love it when our agency partners take us to unexpected places. I love great creative, and so you know, beautiful, behavior changing, eye catching stuff. Really, we really appreciate especially taking, some of our government projects, the subject matter could be sort of objectively dry and boring. And when we see sort of great creative spun out of that, really, really obviously appreciate that.
Sweet. And Cheryl, you've got the last word. What do you appreciate about working with your clients?
100% agree with what Andrew said, but the thing I would also say is just clients who have a genuine passion and interest for the work that they do, like people that aren't the box checkers, but that like care so deeply about, doesn't matter what industry or what the subject is or what the project is, that just like truly want to do good work for their own organizations, is the best situation to be in.
That's awesome. The best situation for me to be in was the last hour with these panelists. I want to thank Cheryl, Sean, Andrew, and Neil for joining us and sharing their perspectives and expertise today. If you are an ACE member, this recording will be available on our website. If you're not, go to adclubedm.com and buy a membership today. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. Take care, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, Adam. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Adam.
Bye.